why was sustained economic growth so rare before the later 18th century and why did this change? And how to analyze this question. So, first things first, I think when you have an essay question like this, I would sit down, write it down on a sheet of A4 paper in really big letters. Don't have your laptop or anything near you. Don't be tempted to look anything up. And just for 5 minutes, circle the keywords of the question and start to annotate it and think perhaps as deeply as you can about the question itself. Because there's certain words here like sustained economic growth that you could take for granted. But when you actually sit down and think about the question in its full form, and you have no distractions as well, you might find that there are certain parts about the question that actually seem interesting to you. And I think that's the main gist of what I want to get in this lesson today. As a historian who wants to produce perhaps like a unique and interesting piece of work, the main thing that you need to hone is your intuition. So, what are the first things to pick up from the title? Feel free to pause the video at this point and perhaps try and do this yourself. So I have annotated this in the second slide. So why was sustained economic growth so rare before the later 18th century and why did this change? So I've underlined, well, I've highlighted sustained economic growth because that's quite a big technical term within the title itself. So if you see the other parts of the question, they're saying things like, they have lots of question words like why was sustained economic growth and why did this change? It also has a certain time period element, which we're going to get into later, but sustained economic growth is a big technical part of the question, and you need to have an understanding of what this is in order to answer the question itself. So I think a lot of the times what brings down an essay, especially in an exam as well, is if they give you a technical question like this, a technical term like this, and you don't have a definition for it. The good thing, however, is that with this title and this essay competition, you have a lot of time and you have the internet and you have access to resources. So it's important to have a definition for this that is not just lifted from other people, but it's something that you think you can work with and use to build up the rest of your essay. So how could we define sustained economic growth? So it's really useful to use a dictionary. I think it's not something that you should overdo, if that makes sense. I think it's something that you should do like at the very beginning, just to make sure that your definition of the term sustained is in line with other people's. But I think the Merriam-Webster definition of this is the best. So maintained at length without interruption or weakening, lasting, prolonged. So this is not something that you need to quote out full in the introduction, but I think it's something that's good to bear in mind. And for me personally, when I see this definition, you might also have a different reaction, which is totally fine and I think really important. The main definition is maintained at length without interruption. And this idea of sustained being, long, steady, continuous, almost like a flat line of growth, right? Like if you're looking at economic growth in a chart. And my first reaction to this, in fact, is that's really quite a hard definition to apply to history. Because remember, with history, when you're looking at economic growth, it's never as steady as like one straight sustained line, isn't it? It's always going to have lots of ups and downs. So in the back of your head, you could start thinking about, how difficult will it be to actually find evidence that supports the idea of sustained economic growth?